Hello there, Mad Mike here, and welcome back to the channel. And today I'm going to go over some issues that have been popping up with the movie X-Men Dark Phoenix. Now, I did do a breakdown on my Will It Fail video for Dark Phoenix that basically said that I thought the film would probably make roughly break even or make a little bit more, and then it would kind of just be forgotten and swept under the rug. That is looking like a very optimistic estimate at this point because critics, I believe on Rotten Tomatoes, the last time I checked, critics had this film at 16%. And after watching a few reviews on it, people seem to basically they say that the movie is a befuddled mess, and a lot of it is very convoluted, and it's not very good. It's not good at all. They're saying that it might actually be the worst Fox X-Men film to come out since the series started in 2000. And the more I kind of look at Dark Phoenix, and the more that I kind of dissect what just looking at it and just trying to understand like why is this movie failing? Like why was there so many problems with it aside from the Disney Fox merger or the buyout? And that really goes to kind of the core of the X-Men franchise. This is a franchise that at this point has set itself up for failure. And the reason behind that is because of what this was imagined as and what it originally was when it was started in 2000. Now, let's rewind here. Let's rewind back to the year 2000 when the first X-Men film came out. You have a lot of really good actors in that film. You had Hugh Jackman, who was an unknown at the time, who was hired for Wolverine. Of course, he became the most iconic character out of the Fox X-Men movies. You had Halle Berry coming in as Storm, who again she would go on to bigger and better things not long after that. And you also had Famke Janssen coming in as Jean Grey, who again she was kind of a middle of the road type of actress, and she kind of she had to it basically that kind of prolonged her career quite significantly. And then you also had your classics. You had Ian McKellen and Patrick Stewart coming in as Magneto and Charles Xavier, respectively, and both of them played their roles perfectly. Um, but I think what you have to look at is you have to look at the aesthetics and what that series was originally designed for. Because back in 2000, most movie studios did not think that people would gravitate towards a superhero film where the heroes look like they did in the comic books, these flashy costumes and stuff like that. You got away with it with Superman for a while, with the Superman 1 and 2, which were directed by Richard Donner. And Batman's costume isn't really flashy; it's very dark and stuff like that. So in '89 that really wasn't a problem. But then you move into some other stuff, and the '90s was kind of, for the most part, it was kind of a cesspool of superhero movies. You had stuff like Batman and Robin. You had stuff like Steel with Shaquille O'Neal, which is god awful. You had stuff like Superman 4, The Quest for Peace, superhero movies were in a bad place in the 90s. You had that original Spawn movie with that CGI that even looked like shit back then. Um, and, you know, at the time, people were they weren't really looking. The thing is that Hollywood didn't think that if they made the films like the comics, that people would gravitate towards it and people would enjoy it. So the idea with the first X-Men film was basically kind of copy the idea that they had put forward with Blade, which came out a couple years prior in 1998. And the idea was to kind of ground the X-Men and make them kind of a bit more realistic in terms of the world that they live in. So when we look at that first X-Men movie, you don't see those really bright, colorful costumes like you did in the comic books. Obviously, most of their costumes are made out of some form of leather or they're all in black essentially. You have a few things. You have like Cyclops' visor and obviously Wolverine's claws and his aesthetic look, his face and stuff. He looks very much like he does in the comic books. But those movies were kind of meant to make you feel like the X-Men were a lot more grounded than what they were in the comic books. There wasn't a lot of bright colors. It was kind of this grimy, sort of dark world in some ways. And again, they were just kind of trying to show you that, they were trying to make them feel more relatable to the public at that time. Now you fast forward to X2 and you ramp things up a little bit, and you change a little bit, but they're still in the street clothes for the majority of the film. And they have a little bit of a tease at the end for the Dark Phoenix stuff. But then when you go into Last Stand is when you really start hitting that wall, because Last Stand was the first not really good X-Men film that came out from Fox. And in that movie, they tried to adapt two different storylines. There was one storyline involving a cure for mutants, which is kind of the driving point of the plot. And then you also had the Dark Phoenix saga kind of melded in a little bit, even though it doesn't make a lot of sense. Where Jean Grey, it turns out that the Phoenix Force is actually this alternate personality that's in her head that Charles Xavier suppressed years and years and years ago because he knew it was dangerous. And that, again, is going against the comic books in a very big way. Now, again, that was the first attempt at kind of a Dark Phoenix type of feel, and there was a lot of problems with that movie aside from just the ill adaptation. But again, they try to kind of make everybody look relatively normal. They're all running around in black leather, and as you move forward in the timeline, they don't really change a whole lot. And again, you go even more forward into films like First Class and Days of Future Past, which, even though they are both good films, they kind of, in certain scenes, they lack the gravity that the X-Men did in the comic books. And I think that's where you kind of run into the problems, is that they have tried to ground them and make them somewhat realistic for so long that there are problems in when you do an adaptation of that, where now you want to be fantastical, because now Marvel and even DC now are getting into that more fantastical element where superheroes are becoming more and more like they are on the pages, as opposed to more and more like what Hollywood executives think people will eat up. And people are enjoying it. So Fox is trying to do that too, or was trying to do that before the buyout. And that's why you saw adaptations of stuff like Days from Future Past, and you had adaptation, then you had Apocalypse after that. But the problem is that in those X-Men movies, a lot of them lack very much so that superhero feel. And I don't exactly know how to describe it, but it's kind of one of those things. If you watch the first Iron Man film, if you sit down and watch the first Iron Man film, it feels like a superhero movie. It feels like a superhero. It feels exactly how it should feel, and it feels perfect for that character. But then you go over to the X-Men movies, and for whatever reason, they don't really feel as much like they're superhero movies. They feel more like they're kind of these. I don't even know how to describe it, but they don't make you kind of feel like that, especially the bad ones. But even the good ones, again, they don't really essentially feel. They don't have that aesthetic. They feel a bit more like, oh, it's kind of this fringe thing where people have powers, as opposed to like, oh, these people are superheroes that go out and do stuff. And Dark Phoenix seems to be just the culmination of all that, where it's a combination of the studio not giving a shit because the entire franchise and every other property at Fox was bought out, and it's going to get rebooted by Marvel anyway. And then you also have the issue where people have those actors who were in that film, a lot of them are signing off and leaving. Obviously this was Jennifer Lawrence's last film. This is Nicholas Holt's last film. James McAvoy, Michael Fassbender, all those people from First Class that were signed on for 3 films and then signed on for an extension for a 4th, they're all going to be gone. Even the young actors are probably going to get recast. So nobody went into this movie thinking that, oh, we're going to have more movies after this with these characters. A lot of them probably didn't. There was a little bit of a motivational problem on top of that. And actually, there was an article that I read that said that in the scene where Mystique is supposed to be killed accidentally by Jean Grey, that the way that they actually got Sophie Turner to uh, cry was they took away her vape pen, and that's kind of pathetic in a way. If you need your actor to get into their right headspace, and the only way you can do it is by taking away their e-cigarette, that's pretty sad in a lot of ways. That I think that shows a lack of commitment in certain circles. But this feels like the culmination of a lot of things, and this feels like the end of a franchise that has become dated. And I think that started, even though X-Men: Days of Future Past was good. I feel like there were issues with that film. There were issues with that film from an adaptation standpoint, even though I thought it was a good movie. And again, you have people that really, really want to make these films like the comic books, and you have people that want to watch the films that share the aesthetic with the comic books. If you don't put the heroes in their classic hero costumes and you have them running around in plain clothes for the entire film, people are not going to enjoy it as much. Because you're not going to see them being superhero. Wolverine running around in a wife beater for 90% of his screen time is not as enjoyable as watching him. Even though it would be kind of goofy, watching him run around in those yellow and powder blue tights. But that's just my opinion on kind of why the franchise has kind of teetered off. In addition to the quality of the films, is that it's become dated, because this was a franchise that was started in 2000, and it was meant to be different. It was meant to be different from the comic books, and now they're trying to make it more similar to them. So I'd like to know what you think. What do you think about the X-Men franchise as a whole? What do you think about Dark Phoenix? Are you going to watch it? Are you excited for it? Do you not care? Do you think this is stupid? Are you waiting for the MCU reboot? Leave your thoughts in the comments. I like to read them. Remember to hit the bell for notifications, like the video, subscribe, and remember, I live my life free of compromise. Do you?